which is that, to me, the standalone claim, I mean, for one thing, I would just define it maybe as it's a claim entered in the canonical debate, as in the claim is created there. If you want to say its provenance is the canonical debate or whatever, that's it. It's the same as erasing a provenance. There is no provenance, right? It's a claim without provenance created in the canonical debate. Now, you could. I mean, it's like saying it's a claim without punctuation. You could intuit the punctuation, right? You may be wrong, but whatever. The thing that's missing for me is, the reason you can understand what the claim is because it's disambiguated, right? So you could call that putting the context right there. The context is provided by the user so that it's to be understood, right? But it's the same thing to some degree. What was missing to me is a comparison there of a claim in Chialo. People can debate a claim in Chialo. It's not like they say, "Oh, this came from a separate text." They just start a debate, right? And so I think a sentence on its own can be debated meaningfully, even though it's not pulled from a richer context. And the point of disambiguation is to further better specify what the creator was trying to say. Now, as I've said before, I think that the primary key lies in the disambiguation once the disambiguation is fully complete. But those would be my clarifications. I think, in general terms, standalone claim, I think I'm on the same page. And I don't know what name you ended up with in terms of a contextual claim, but
so far it's contextual claim. Yeah. The one statement you just said, which I agree with, and it may come as a surprise, is it can be the standalone claim can be meaningfully debated. I do actually believe it can be done. I do believe that only up to a point, and there's a point where we'll want to refer to the same claim in different contexts to resolve some of those debates. But can it be meaningfully debated until then? Yes, absolutely. Of course, the one point I'm making about standalone claim is that when I say it's meaningless without context, is even the disambiguated claim. Okay, you said totally disambiguated. That is obviously one thing I don't agree with. I think disambiguation is always provisional. We've disambiguated up to this point, which is good enough for the current purpose and won't be good enough when we dig deeper. And that's fine.
Okay, but wait, but there's
it's a totally I'm objecting to
disambiguations there, right? When I say fully disambiguated, I mean that there is no part of the statement that doesn't have a disambiguation. Not that the disambiguation isn't ambiguous, right? That's one thing I've always been saying is yes, I know there's ambiguous claims, right? Because there's ambiguous definitions. Fully disambiguated means somebody did the work of providing some sort of disambiguation for each, not necessarily word, but each piece of each concept in that claim, right? That's fully disambiguated to me. And then I agree, you can redo the same debate with a separate claim that's identical and everything, except you've changed one of the disambiguations to maybe be less ambiguous, or you're trying a different disambiguation. The thing is, they're distinct claims now because they have different disambiguations.
I do. And my point is that the disambiguation itself has ambiguity, and which carries recursively. And that means that nothing is ever fully disambiguated because it would require every disambiguating definition to be fully disambiguated, and so on recursively, which is impossible.
Yeah, I'm
Maybe
not
to
sure I
say
want to
that
do.
each concept has had an identifier pointed to it, and that identifier could
Exactly.
be completely ambiguous. Like we don't know if this is Paris the
Yeah.
city or Paris the town. Just
Yeah,
as long as we have an ID to associate with that concept of the string in the system. And
Exactly.
then if what someone wants to, instead of debating the disambiguation of that concept, that a new concept is created with a different identifier for that concept.
Okay, and there I agree. At some point we're saying there's a point where this has been, we've done the work of identifying some definitions for that sentence, and it's a state. Is it an important state? I don't know, but it's a state. And each of those definitions is subject to further discussion, of course, and that means even without changing, we'll find there's a fork in the meaning of that definition, because we'll introduce a distinction in the meaning of one of the words, even though we had defined it at some point. Does that mean that the term, of course, the original claim still had definitions attached to each word, and that could be meaning something. It's not fully disambiguated in the sense we can still find new distinctions to introduce. Does that make it a different claim? It's that if the different claim is unresolved, if the new distinction is unresolved for that claim still is still ambiguous, but that's fine.
Yeah, so it's not really disambiguation. It's more like concepts have been identified.
Yeah.
And so Marc-Antoine, I forgot the term. What's the term where was it concepts or no
Topics.
Topics, right? So has the sentence been divided up into topics?
Yeah.
Is kind of what we're saying. And if it has, then if someone argues about a topic rather than arguing about whether that topic is associated to the correct sentence fragment, is that you create a separate claim.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I wouldn't create a separate claim. Oh, sorry. Should follow the conversation a bit. Yeah, we should maybe.
Yeah, we should probably jump to
introductions.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I don't know, Felix, if you want to restart the recording and just have the whole thing.
Do you want to have the last conversation recorded or not?
I think it's useful.
Yeah.
So then I'll leave it.
Leave it.
Stephen.
Hi, sorry for that. Yeah, I don't know what the plan was. I didn't hear the introduction to the introductions.
No, well, we were continuing yesterday until you came. So now let's do introductions.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe I think, Timothy, first of all, it makes sense that you introduce what the Canonical Debate Lab is. I don't know whether Carl had a chance to look at the website, but I think that might be a good starting point. And then each of us can maybe go over each of our individual projects, give like a maximum 4-minute explanation. And then I hope to give Carl a bit more time to go into more detail into Howdy. Is that the name? Or maybe that's a
how'd you know that?
Right.
Yeah. I don't think I actually say how it's supposed to be pronounced. I should probably do that.
How do you say it?
I say how'd you.
Like how do you, but it's how'd you.
Yeah.
Right.
It was the only version of like thing close to how'd you know that was available as a domain, a .com
spelling, yeah.
at the time.
Understood.
Nice.
Okay, well, let's see. I'm one of the co-founders of the Canonical Debate Lab. We call it CDL for short. And we came together actually several years ago now. And it was, we actually met the first founding members in the Democracy Earth Slack. I don't know if you ever heard of Democracy Earth. We're a kind of a community that came out of that community. We're not at all affiliated with it though. Democracy Earth is about kind of implementing direct democracy, maybe on the blockchain. And actually, I got to them through a TED Talk that I saw with one of the founders of Democracy Earth, who was talking about essentially how technology has gotten to the point where the current forms of democracy seem antiquated. Like the democracy could be rethought given our new communication and information technologies. And so part of their mission is to build the tools for kind of a democracy 2.0. And from their side, you know, they're working on the tools of voting, the mechanics of voting. And I always felt that direct democracy or any kind of democracy fails if the population that is voting that is not well educated or doesn't have access to good information. It's only as good as the people and the information they have. And given that, I felt the most important thing to solve would be the problem of people having the best information, right? That's one of the reasons for me starting on this kind of project. In general, it just came down to making better decisions or finding facts and that sort of thing. Well, in Democracy Earth community, I found several of the people who had already had exactly the same idea. In fact, software developers all building their own version of the same vision. And so we created the Canonical Debate Lab basically to start thinking through the issues together and hopefully to, at some point, collaborate together, build the tools together. Since then, other members have come in. We found it much harder to agree on the details of you know, all sides of the problem. Features and you know, features, in other words, what it should do, the interface or how it should do it, and also just the underlying domain model. So we keep circling around. We've been having 3 hangouts a week, 3 hours a week, talking about our ideas to get an understanding and hopefully eventually start building tools, either the same tool or tools that work together. So that's it, hopefully in a nutshell.
I can go next if we wanted to do it in the order of coming into the group.
Coming into the group, sure.
Yeah. So I think Tim came up with the name CDL, but I was right there when it was
Actually,
founded.
I voted
So
against it.
Oh, really? I forgot.
Canonical, I think, or something.
Definitely Canonical.
Debate lab, plural.
Right. You didn't like the
lost
lab
that
part.
But anyway.
I like the lab because we sure as hell haven't produced anything yet. But yeah, the canonical debate system is slightly different, and that's going to be potentially one of the implementations. Anyway, so I was there, Tim and I met. Like I said, I forgot it was Democracy Earth, but that's absolutely true. So my little thing in this is I'd been working for, just like Tim, like for eight years so before we found each other on the internet, on this problem in several different iterations. My most recent is Gullybot.com. So you'll see me talking about that and the way that fits into. So I'm a software engineer, of course. You know, we're all, not all, but most of us, pretty much. I mean, all of us do it. Where I'm kind of coming at in my direction, this is my concern is more on kind of the scoring side. So how can you, without voting, gather up all of the facts, weight them, and kind of give a score that the system knows based on this, the information the system has been provided so far. And then people can change the weighting by justifying the changes, and then those changes can be debated. It's kind of a rough thing. So Gullybot's a character where I'm starting to put things, so it's going to be a media platform. So it's a one-way thing. It doesn't have a lot of the stuff that CDL wants to have. It's really an early experiment with the scoring section of canonical debate. So it's a very focused experiment, and doesn't cover the full scope. So I haven't been as participating in these meetings recently because they're busy hashing out the shared format and a lot of the other features and stuff, and scoring's not important enough yet. We did have a couple meetings a couple of days ago, but it's later in the stack. So I've been off doing my own thing. But yeah, software engineering for 30 years, was a CTO of a startup. I don't know. That's probably all that's relevant. So yeah, basically contracting half time and then working on Golibot the other half. I don't remember who came in next. Was that
I
Felix?
think either Felix or me, but I don't remember.
Yeah, you.
Okay, then I'll quickly start. I'll keep it short because I think Carl found me originally. Was it through the paper or the website, actually, out of interest? Because he
It was,
emailed me on my
I was-
DTU.
I just on a lark, I was already aware of Argumon, and I Googled alternatives to Argumon, and then I found Socrates on that, alternative 2 website, and I had not seen Socrates before, and I was like, oh wow, this is I wasn't aware of this work, so this is exciting.
I wonder which AI added that. It wasn't me.
I don't know.
Okay, yeah, it's pretty accurate though. So yeah, and then you find my DTU email. That's why I was asking. But there's a paper out there that explains it in detail.
That was from the paper. Yeah, and I read
Okay.
your paper.
Okay, so then I can do a quick summary, and basically I focus on the user experience. I think a lot of these argumentation technologies, unlike Argument, actually, Argument is a nice example of a nice UX technology, but most of the ones that you can find in literature, especially, are very focused on formal logic. And I am trying to approach it much more from an informal logic primarily angle, with actual everyday end users in mind, like people that just want to contribute to a tiny tidbit of information in a news article. Hey, I don't think this is true because, and that they can plug it into like some central database. And Socrates so far wasn't meant to be perfect. It was more like a first prototype to start exploring some initial interactions that I have in mind. And yeah, the backlog is immense. So I ran one experiment so far, and that I learned a lot from that. And what I learned wasn't that it's not always as useful, because I knew that, but like more of the underlying building blocks, like what are the shortcomings of them. So in that sense, a lot of those insights I bring to the table here when talking about the data format, etc. So that's me. Users first.
Technology second. Yeah. Yeah, I'm Felix from Germany, computer scientist. I found that, yeah, I had already created 3 argument graph communication projects. Also with my master thesis. And my goal was always to scale communication and argumentation of people, like scale it to the millions. And yeah, that's always concerns I have, how we can scale and how we can also scale the curation moderation part of things, like Sybil attacks and stuff like this. And yeah, the more I discover about this whole topic, the more complicated it gets. So yeah, I hope that at some point we have a product, but let's see. Okay, over.
Marc-Antoine Parent, actually Felix invited me in the group.
Right.
I come from a slightly different story. I worked on a tool for collective intelligence where we were extracting ideas from a conversation by hand, but trying to make a kind of mind map, emerging mind map from a conversation. And I was interested in what happens if different people have a totally different perspective on how to organize this, and how do we what happens if we have 2 totally different mind maps and we want to kind of mesh them together into a combined worldview. And I found a lot of the efforts for mapping, like knowledge mapping really, or opinion mapping or project mapping, it's the same problem, right? They rely a lot in the end on skilled mappers. which means you get the point of view of a single mapper or very small number of mappers. And on the one hand, you cannot get people without skill to do this well. But on the other hand, I'm thinking if we can scale up the number of mappers, then what happens is we have conflicting maps and we want to combine them. And that's one aspect. And the other aspect is there's so many crazy UI ideas I have. I won't have time to do them all. I don't hope to do them all. I want an ecosystem of tools so that I can build one thing, somebody else can build something else, and people can share data and use whichever visualization tool, whichever UX for whatever specific use case they have in mind, and then use another tool. So that means two-way sync between all systems. That way I'm a bit of, I believe very much that we should be able to operate on all the knowledge bases as one, but I don't want to centralize them the way Tim speaks of the CDL. For me, it's a federation, but we want to be able to act on it as if it were one thing, though it's federated. So for my main concern is what are the fundamental building blocks of the data model on which we can build this interoperability, and a lot of concern about basic concepts and allowing the conversation about the conversation, meta thinking, and being able to think about different viewpoints and integrating them. So that's my starting point. Tons of specifics from there. Big project. The original project was IdeaLoom, but the project for the intertool protocol is called HyperKnowledge. Both of those are sites.org. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. So I guess at this point, I'd like to do some introduction, and then maybe I'm allowed to go a little bit longer at length on the how'd you, I guess. Okay.
Yep.
Let's see where to start. I personally got interested in this space around 2009. It was just some stuff around the birtherism of like where was Barack Obama born, and climate change. Those things like really stuck out to me as things that it's like, wow, these people seem to be having not very informed conversation, and how do we summarize, or how do we find a way to convey complicated information to people. I'm not sure that climate change actually is the best choice for trying to convey information to people who otherwise wouldn't be just looking at the direct information. I think there's a lot of other places maybe where this technology is going to be more effective. But yeah, I did some work in 2009, didn't touch it for many years as we're focusing more on professional work. Now I'm working in Seattle for Google on Google Meet. Let's see. So and then around 2017, I did a sort of re-implementation of Howju. And as far as like my interests, I think to the degree that I'm understanding so far, it's very similar to Stephen's, where I'm very interested in kind of like the end users ease of use, and the ease of a sort of your, if not your average person, just your busy person getting information quickly from the site. So Howju focuses heavily on sourcing from, well, I don't know if I should say heavily, I've got a backlog. I also feel that there's a backlog that goes forever, but heavily on interaction with the site. So sourcing claims from sites, using those as justifications for propositions, combining propositions to then form derivative propositions, or propositions that are justified by other propositions. It's interesting to come to this group, and then especially to read the white paper. I'm down to scoring right now on the paper. I didn't realize it was like 100 pages long. I went to print it to see, okay, wait, how many pages is this? Because it seems quite long. So yeah, I didn't finish it last night. But it's really interesting to see this group's work, because I was not aware of other people working on this exact issue, and so to see you looking at the same problems that I've basically been kind of mulling over, and like, oh, is it this way or is it that way? Well, if you do it that way, it's this way, but if you do it that way, you get that. That's pretty exciting. I did spend some time around 2017 with the MisinfoCon and the CredCon people. I don't know if you've heard of this group, but there's a group of people who are tackling the misinformation problem, in my opinion, a little bit reactively and a little bit kind of using or taking the status quo and sort of trying to, maybe supercharge it by adding, credibility indicators or, like nutrition facts for news or information. I didn't gain a lot of traction, talking to those people with, my idea with Howju, which again is if you're not haven't had a chance to like glance at Howju, it's very similar to Socrates in many ways. Socrates is in many ways.
If you
So yeah,
want
kind of became a
to,
little bit.
if you want, you can just later or now walk over it and screen share, right? While you explain it, makes it a bit more visual, if that's
Yeah,
relevant to
sure.
what you're explaining.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't prepare any sort of presentation or anything. Let's I'm used to using Meet. Let's see. So I think this is going to bring us there. Okay, so you can see my web browser, Chrome. Okay, so I mean, one of the first things you'd notice if you came here is that I'm basically the only user because I never got to a point where I felt that this site was, had what what would be necessary to actually start serving other users, and I didn't want to get too many people or really anyone kind of expecting a particular design before I felt like I was like, okay, I think this is kind of how it should be. And I guess maybe to sort of tie off just my coming into this group at this time, I kind of felt that I was at a point like, okay, I think I understand enough about what I think this solution to this problem should look like. I need to start branching out and actually getting people on the site. Looking for. I didn't think I would find something like CDL where there was a group of people working on very similar technologies. So that's exciting. But okay, so coming to Howju, I don't have off the top of my head a great example of a page to look at. So a lot of these propositions you're going to see have single justifications under them because I have just been on a website and I've been like, oh, that's an interesting claim. I think it infers, or I think it implies this other proposition, and so I've just added one thing here. So I'd have to spend some time thinking like what would be a good page to look at. But you can see, just looking at the page, sort of the what did you call it? Is this the container layout, Stephen? I liked how you had this sort of taxonomy of models or approaches.
Yeah, that's actually even a taxonomy that's not in literature. So I tried to contribute that, but it didn't get accepted. But yeah, I think I called this a container view indeed, which is a big difference with a graph view, which we'll look later at if Timothy represents a debate graph, a debate map. I keep mixing these two up.
Yeah. Let's see, actually, there was one, I'm trying to remember, where was this? I think I have a few things about Hunter Biden, maybe. Okay, so I got a little interested in this whole Ukrainian prosecutor stuff. So let me see, I forget which one of these is in the middle and which one of these are, no, this isn't the one. One of these has justifications underneath, which are themselves propositions, which makes it a little more interesting. So see usages. Sorry, I wish I had thought of showing off one of these beforehand.
No worries. Stephen, can you quickly summarize the container model?
Well, the container model only shows one level in the graph deep, you could say. So it only ever shows supporting and opposing of the current thing that's the focus of attention. Whereas a lot of prior systems in academia, they have more the debate map approach where you keep digging down to the graph, but then you have the problem if you have cycles, then how do you deal with that? You show it as a reuse of the same claim that's reused in multiple things, or like debate map does it now, it just replicates the same claim over and over as you dig deeper. So in the paper, I argue why it's important to have a container view if you really are aiming for our claim reuse. Yeah, that's in short.
Okay,
repetition was already in the original. What's it called?
There's many systems that support reuse, but
here we go.
not free of context. But let's not go to our lengthy
Yeah.
discussion from
Yeah,
yesterday now.
Okay, so while we were chatting, I found maybe one of the more interesting, as far as having justifications on both sides and some layers. And sorry, I wasn't following the conversation too closely because I was trying to find this. So here we have here we have a proposition. For me, I think CDL is also using the terminology they're throwing in the terminology proposition, but yeah, it's claim. It's a run of text that ideally forms a a neutral point of view, ideally context free, which is admittedly a unrealistic ideal. Nothing is ever context free for human communication, but to the degree that users are encouraged to try and create this text up here, this proposition as context free, to provide the context in text, not necessarily to be added on top. There are tags, but those are more to connect things that are not textually visual. So, I mean, this text here, Joe Biden influenced the firing of the chief Ukrainian prosecutor in order to interfere with corruption investigations into Hunter Biden's employer. If a person didn't know the background of that, they might not realize that it was relevant to the Donald Trump impeachment. But like a tag helps users connect related things. It's not. I think that might easily be confused with the addition of context. As I'm partway down the white paper. I'm like, I think you all might be planning on adding like sort of context pills or context tags to say, this is actually about this location, not this other location, or this is about the U.S., not about Germany or something. And that's different from how I'm thinking about tags.
Yeah, the context in the white, like sometimes they'll say context as defined in the white paper. The white paper is mostly my view on things, and so it shouldn't necessarily be taken as the goal of everyone here. That's one of the things we're still debating is how to do that. Yeah, I imagined it mostly as entities connected through a knowledge graph. But that's evolved somewhat, and we can go over another time that. But you're right. In any case, with my current view of how it should be, this is a different thing, which is almost like connecting to categories or discussions in general society or events or things like that. Right. This is related to this debate, in lowercase debate going on. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. And then, so what you can see on this page is that, so I've personally kind of gone back and forth between different types of justifications. So I share the terminology target. So each one of these justifications under the proposition target the proposition above, either imparting truth or falsehood. I'd also like to add a third neutral polarity of justification, saying like this thing just is unknowable, like it couldn't be true or false. Like I think that's a useful thing to capture, but I haven't added that yet. So this one, this justification here is a quote-based justification. And so it's saying that he had fired the chief Ukrainian prosecutor at the time, I guess I don't have to read it off to you, but basically this would be something, for example, someone might be reading this Real Clear Investigations is a conservative leaning source. And so it is, purporting this claim that, Joe Biden influenced the firing. And then, so I most likely at some point I added this one, and then I started researching it. And I guess, sorry, I didn't sleep well last night. I was busy reading the white paper. So apologize for this being a little bit disjointed. But something that really bugged me about the lack of tooling in this space was that, as you all have noticed, I think there isn't a place to capture any fact-checking work. So fact-checking a claim is pretty time intensive. Like actually fact-checking a claim like this one, that can take anywhere from 1 hour to do like a very cursory glance, or it could take up to 6 hours or more, spread out perhaps over days to really dive deep into the nuances of this claim, the different sources that might be available. And I'm a sort of information-based person, probably like a lot of us, and I like fact-checking or researching claims like this. But I was frustrated that if I would expend that effort, like, what do I do? At one point I was posting to Facebook, like, hey, like, here's the claim, that I saw. Basically, here's, what I found out about it. And so here's, my conclusion, like, false for this reason or true for this reason. I mean, I wasn't like literally that formulaic about it, but I was basically, posting this sort of factoid on Facebook. And there might ensue a short discussion for the people who happen to see that post at that time, due to relevancy and Facebook's algorithm. And sometimes an interesting conversation would ensue, but then those conversations were all sort of limited in time. They're all temporal. They would sort of fade away over time. And if I had the same conversation later, I would basically have to go and copy paste what was said earlier, or just reiterate the same things I said previously. And I observed similar behavior on Reddit. If I don't know if some of you have seen this, but there, at least when I used to be a heavy Redditor, I would notice there are people who specialize in finding certain claims or arguments and then copy pasting. It's like they almost have like some database somewhere, some spreadsheet perhaps filled with their previous comments, with all the links to the sources, and they will just paste that verbatim over. And I was like, wow, it's so interesting that some people are engaged in this, but why do they have to go through this effort of, copy pasting when there should be a better tool for that? Okay, sorry. So it's a little bit of a digression. But so right now I'm kind of oh yeah, sorry.
Let me throw in a little parenthesis
please interrupt,
here.
please.
One project that first of all, I've had several ideas regarding that specific problem you mentioned, which isn't exactly the canonical debate. They're related, so we can talk about it another time. But the parentheses I want to throw in here is there's one other project that's not represented in the members that are here today, which is Ysaurus. There are some recent posts you may have noticed. Ysaurus is another website that works with us and is doing similar things, and they're very much focused on this sort of like this example of supporting justifications, which is they want people to debate by contributing evidence. In fact, they call instead of justification, they call everything provide evidence, because they especially would like to see people pulling in information from outside to support the different arguments. And in the CD as well, I kind of see that sort of thing as the leaf elements of some, although evidence is a type of argument, and then evidence is also debatable, right? Is this evidence true? Is it from a reliable source? Is it saying what you think it's saying? All those things are debates on their own.
Is it relevant? Is it actually, and so on. Yeah. While we're speaking about other projects, very quickly, people here, one other close partner of CDL is Society Library. They're using a tool called Debate Map, which is a pretty advanced debate mapping tool. And they're very interested in actually mapping social debates. So getting all those quotes from actual media, like they take quotes and it's okay, this is this claim by this person, what can be inferred from it, what are the hidden presuppositions, so they make this mapping of all this. So that is probably also relevant in the survey, in our closed ecosystem.
What was the last thing you said, Mark?
They're relevant in our, the close neighborhood of our ecosystem.
Oh, okay, great, yeah, thank you. Is it? Do I say Mark or is it Marc Antoine?
It's Marc Antoine.
Do I have to say
Marc Antoine or Marc Anthony if Marc Antoine is confusing? But
I'm not going to say the Antoine part correctly, so if Marc Anthony is okay, I might say that.
Marc Anthony is absolutely fine. It's still my name. Marcos Antonius.
Okay.
Marco Antonio.
I didn't know that. Oh, nice. Yeah. You can call me Charles then. Okay. So let's see. Yeah. So I guess this. So there's one thing I've not done a lot in the site is to add sort of what's the word? Sort of in place context. So one thing you might have noticed me doing a lot was doing the C usages of these propositions to kind of discover where they were on the graph. Those are like those types of things, like is this used and where? Those types of things I think should be on page, at least like a little, you know, icon, like, hey, this is used in 3 different, you know, arguments. But I have avoided anything that's basically not based off of the sort of normalized, you know, relational data model, because I wanted to make sure I was somewhat close to what I thought I wanted to do before I started adding derivative, you know, jobs and derivative, you know, data or, you know, derivative information on top. So, but part of my reason I was thinking to say that is that one bit of sort of that, you know, information about the claim I have here is that at least you can see how many justifications there are underneath a proposition that you're seeing used. Oh, and I guess this is what I call a compound justification, where it combines propositions together. And I think maybe this is something we could discuss more, you know, Stephen or others who are, you know, kind of looking at this. Is I think, Stephen, right now I didn't quite understand this about Socrates, but I'm pretty sure that right now Socrates is claim, you know, as justification, and then it targets a claim. But then in the branch, you can, you know, have the argument for the argument, where I think you could add, you know, supporting claims that, you know, strengthen that claim or that detract from that claim. To me, in my mind, I was like, oh, I think I remember having that exact same thought. Like, should I, you know, sort of allow people to have arguments and arguments? And I think to some degree, this compound justification is a little bit like having, you know, positive or pro arguments on the branch or in the argument to the argument. I don't know.
It's interesting you bring this up, because in this group we've probably at least spent already 6 hours on this exact topic, and
Okay.
the current we don't have agreement. The way I do it on Socrates is I only allow atomic claims, and then indeed I do it through adding supporting on the branch. But we've also at great length discussed whether or not a compound claim should just be a thing by its own right. But so yeah, we could resurface that, maybe not anytime soon. I think there's more interesting things to talk about first, including actually the meeting we had yesterday might be relevant to you, when we talked at great length what it means for a claim to be standalone, or to be able to reuse. And you hinted a bit at that, like you ask your users to try to have a context-free claim. We dove deep into that yesterday, what that means, and I think we might continue that.
I might try to have a more
no
formal
solutions
version
to
of that tomorrow. No, Friday, sorry.
So no solutions to compound claims. I think it's one of the trickier bits, and I don't think we know what is the right solution until we just try it out.
One of the few things we do agree on very strongly is that it is important to be able to enter informal arguments and make them more formal later, make them more structured, more less ambiguous, and so on. There's this notion of progressive formalization. That's one of our strong points of agreement. In that way, the fact that an argument that looks like one argument in informal form ends up being many arguments in formal form is something that will happen. So being able to say an argument actually can be decomposed as many arguments after the fact, that's absolutely something that will happen at the data level. What will happen at the UX level, of course, is a totally different matter, and is totally open to discussion. But certainly, because of this strong stance that arguments will be refined in time, there's some interesting non-obvious corollaries, such as compound claims will happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then, oh, sorry.
If you want to follow up with that with a thought, go ahead. I'm changing the subject a little.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that sort of my current thinking on the matter is that since I'm sort of looking at things from a more practical perspective in terms of like what's the fastest way users trying to evaluate the truth should go, I was thinking they need compound propositions, because you have to have a way of combining claims that together, you know, imply something. But then for the disjunctive case, or the oring together, like that's just from alternation of different justifications. Like I didn't see any need to put two propositions together in an or fashion, because in that sense, you know, it's like the person could just evaluate those separately.
We spoke a lot about disjunctive normal form.
Yeah, and One point that, like, one example that I talk about a lot for this sort of question is, you know, if you have the debate, Trump was a great president, and you want to support it by saying Trump built a wall, right? You can support and oppose the same claim with the same statement that Trump built a wall, right? Because you either like or don't like the wall. And so it's already begging that you finish that thought, right? Trump built the wall and it sent a bad signal to our allies, or Trump built a wall and it was inhumane, or Trump built a wall and it kept out dangerous criminals, or something like that, right? So you have two separate, what I would call claims there, working together into one proposition or argument, as we usually call it. Now, the other the thing I was going to ask was, do you in your system have a notion of separation between supporting the substance of a justification, which means this is true or not true, and supporting the effectiveness of it, meaning, well, this is irrelevant, or, you know, this isn't important. Do you have that distinction in how you?
No, and I found that really interesting in the white paper. Yeah, where you're talking about the, you know, separating, you know, the sort of the truth argument versus the, you know, relevance, or the, you know, just the more formal logic. And in my opinion, for this tool, I wanted to be, again, more pragmatic. So I didn't think users needed to be aware of different, you know, ways in the tool to, you know, to counter a claim. If there's a logical counter to the claim, you know, use that. If there's a factual counter to the claim, and sorry, while we were chatting, I just kind of drilled down so you can see, like, there's this sort of you know, breadcrumbs thing, which is something that Socrates, you know, also had. So now we're, you know, a couple layers deep, and just to maybe finish up this example, I found this interesting. Is that, so I actually found, I came to this, you know, with you know, somewhat, I don't know, you might say left, or, you know, liberal leaning, thinking that, okay, this claim is, you know, absurd. You know, Joe Biden didn't, you know, do anything improper. And I actually, to some degree, I have not had a chance to follow up on this factually, but, you know, so one of the, you know, propositions I rely upon with that is that the prosecutor general's office wasn't even, you know, investigating, you know, at the time that Biden seemed to be involved in this matter. But then I found this Kiev Post, which I haven't even had time to look into, is this a legit, you know, site or not? But they say, like, no, like, in, you know, in that time frame, the prosecutor general office did have a claim that was open. And something I have not added is, like, the better integration. So if you click on this, you go to the website, but I've been working on a browser extension. It's not full yet, and, you know, I could have, I guess, I should have copied the text before clicking over. So right now, the state of the art is, you know, copying the text. Ooh, interesting. All right, let me leave that page open. Lose this bug.
It wouldn't be a demo without this.
But let me duplicate. Yeah,
Demo is
yeah, it wouldn't. Let's see, what was I saying? Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's enough maybe on that matter. There's a few things that are kind of unique, or not unique, but two things that aren't visible because I have not designed them, but things I'd like to go that may be worth mentioning. I don't know. Does that sound good, or did anyone?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So okay. So one thing that is a little bit, don't have on the site, haven't used a lot myself, but I'm interested in, is this concept of appearances versus you know, using a quote as justification. And so what I mean when I say appearance is that sometimes when I at least am looking at a piece of, you know, a source, like a piece of information, like a article, I'm either in, like, sort of a constructive mode, like, okay, I largely agree with what I'm seeing. I'm mostly looking for, okay, what can I use this, you know, information for? What can I prove with it? And that would be, you know, sort of the mode of using quotes I find as evidence for different claims. But then there's other times where I'm in more of a critical mode, where I'm like, I'm on, you know, some news site that I usually wouldn't frequent, but I'm interested in what they have to say. Oh, here's this claim. Oh, that's so wrong. I'm sure it must be. I don't really want to. I want to capture the difference between, say, I could use a quote from that website to justify a proposition that I believe them to be justifying, even though it may not be, you know, explicit in their text. And then I could add my own, you know, counter, or, like, you know, justification, or, you know, disjustification, we'll call it negative justification to that. But I think I would like to be a little bit more explicit about it and say, no, I'm not actually trying to justify anything with that as a user. I'm showing that I think this proposition appears. So I want to paraphrase their quote and say, okay, this proposition that I, as the user, am entering, I claim, I say as a user that it appears here in the source, and then I'm going to disprove that claim. And I'm interested in doing that because I'm interested in collecting sort of a scorecard of how users who are like me view sources. Like, users like you tend to think this source is authoritative. Users who are not like you, tend to find this source, not authoritative. I can't remember which one I just said, but anyway, the opposite.
Bogus.
Yeah, bogus. Yeah, so that's one area I'm interested in sort of actively exploring.
That does go into one of the things I was talking about with evidence, where and this goes back to the conversation from yesterday. I didn't get to finish one thing I was going to say about claims, which was like a standalone claim doesn't have links to the outside world, where I disagree with that, because I came to the conclusion that when you make a statement about something like that article is one of the concepts that has to be included in the disambiguation. So in other words, you are talking about an article, and that article must be then an entity represented in the system as something that's part of your claim.
Remember, so you rewatch the thing. I would be okay with that if that is immutable and captured in the data format we share by external sources.
Right.
That's a distinction. If you link to a website and the website can change, and it's unclear which links on that website subsequently you need to follow, that's what I don't call standalone. But if we're ever gonna attach as context a full paper or whatever, that would make sense, but then it needs to be clear that it's still only everything that's encompassed within the standalone claim that should be taken into account.
Yeah, I mean, that requires a solution for evidence, or a solution, that's why the workaround we do for now would be the Internet Archive.
Yes.
Get a link, put it in Internet Archive, a link to the Internet Archive. It's the best we can do so far. And then, like, I would expect some point we do a project that's focused on making sure evidence stays available, right? But that's a long-term thing. One thing I want to go back to.
Very quickly, we need to reuse existing tools. Like, you're speaking of making a browser plugin, like reuse hypothesis or Memex or all these innumerable tools that allow you to take take quotes from sites and record them. They've got a good API. It's easy to use that as a data source. It's just faster. And I think it even has a link.
It's not immutable. Like,
yes,
if the site goes down, which happens all the time, that links are everywhere. Then your standalone claim is pretty much.
I think you can ask hypothesis to archive the site. If I remember well, I'll check that.
I mean, yeah, you can use it on
a conceptual level. It's on a conceptual level. For a standalone claim, the requirement on a conceptual level is that all information is contained within the claim. And
I agree totally.
You know where the boundary lies of what you're supposed to look at and not look at to interpret the claim. How to achieve that technically doesn't matter.
Guys, I have a really hard stop in 1 minute because I have to run the meeting. One thing there won't be time for debate map. We can do it another time. Lots of obviously conversations is just the start that we could go over with you, Carl. The one thought I just wanted to finish off real quick is about the justifications or arguments for or against the effectiveness of an argument versus the substance of it. One thing that's important to keep in mind that we found is when you're reusing a justification as a claim, the reuse, what should get carried over are all the underlying justifications for whether or not it's true. But whether or not it's an effective argument doesn't carry over. That's one of the reasons that it's important to have the distinction. Is arguments about this is meaningless and this to prove this doesn't help, doesn't carry over to the next thing you're trying to prove with that piece of information.
Not free of context. It includes
a different word use of context.
Yeah, but because
I think
that's the
I'm
difference. It includes the conclusion into the context of the premise that is targeting conclusion. So that's why you need to separate them.
Yeah, that distinction
Bye, Tim.
I think is absolutely essential. Bye, Tim.
Yeah, that's also the main reason. I said that Socrates for me was a prototype, and the two main things that I wanted to prototype was exactly relevance, because I don't know any systems, or I didn't know any systems that had that before, and negations, because these were two essential features that I recognized that I couldn't test, and mocking it in like Excel and whatever wasn't working. So I just built a system instead to try that.
Yeah, I'd have to think a bit more about this. So this tool includes counter justifications, and right now they are propositions. And I think in the white paper it mentions, you know, a relevance argument could be captured as a proposition. You know, like in terms of like make the most general description of the slippery man or slippery slope argument that you can, make that into a proposition. Use that as a relevance argument. Like you would just enter that as text. You know, like you know, the slippery slope argument doesn't apply to when blankety blank. Slippery slope argument. Anyway, you could imagine writing a, you know, sort of point of, or, you know, neutral context free description of the slippery slope argument applying, you know, to this particular case, and then now that's its own proposition, and that can be argued. Okay, you know, is it true that the slippery slope argument doesn't apply when, you know, these such and such things are the case? That I think is sort of shoehorning, you know, this type of countering into, you know, the tools design. What another thing I'm interested in exploring is free text justification. So what I'm calling summary justifications right now, for lack of a better term, or doc-based justifications, where the user can write any text they want, and then they're responsible for basically creating appearances of other propositions in them. So that, and that those are not canonical. Those are not, you know, sort of context-free pieces of text. Those are actually, you know, highly contextual, but they can connect them to the canonical, or, you know, to like the claims, the propositions through, you know, quote unquote appearances. So that's like I'm thinking of sort of different uses of appearance. I don't know if that description
No,
makes
can you
any
make
sense.
that more visuals somehow? Because I'm not certain I fully got it, but it sounds
I
similar
can't
to.
make it more. Oh, sorry, what?
It sounds similar to what I do, maybe on the homepage of Socrates with the pizza example, but I'm not certain.
Is it
What?
socrates.com?
Yeah, oh, wiki. I adopt wiki. I don't have a com. I'm not rich.
Oops.
Aren't wikis even more expensive than com now?
No, well, maybe not when I got it like 8 years ago. Yeah, if you scroll down, you have a piece of text. This is what I imagine that a user would write, like on a blog or whatever. And then if it maybe that's your appearance. I'm not certain. You can just link to the system basically, and this links into a standalone claim on Socrates.
Yeah, that's very like that. The only thing that I still want to figure out is how multiple users can create appearances in a single piece of text. But yeah, it would be very much like this.
Yeah, exactly. And I always distinguish two use cases. The first one I want to support is this one, that an author does the linking, then there's no potential disagreement. The author controls what it's being linked to. The other one would need a browser plugin of some sort where you can annotate anything on the web and start saying, I think this piece of text is that claim, but people might disagree. And that might also even be wrong, and spam, etc. So that's why I can distinguish them as two separate use cases. Oh, but you have a browser plugin. Maybe you can download that?
I do. It's not behaving like it should. So like, I don't know why the context menu, like, it's something that I worked on, but have not, you know, tested very thoroughly. So it's here, it's creating a little iframe, and it tried to find any justifications that use this, you know, URL as a basis. But then it's also supposed to have, let me try reloading the page. I loaded the development version first accidentally. I forgot which one was on the left, which one was on the right. Let me try. Let me see now if the context menu appears. Yeah, I don't know why it doesn't say add to Howju. So yeah, so anyway, there should be something here, add to Howju. I don't know why it's not showing up. And right now that would just be using this the quoted text as a, you know, justification for then some proposition you would be wanting to add. But what I'm interested in doing is, I was mentioning the constructive versus, or, you know, constructive versus critical mindsets. I think there's two things I would want to do looking at most pages. It's either, oh wow, this is, you know, a useful factor, useful source of information. I want to prove something with it as a justification, or, oh, I'm not really sure about this. I want to make an appearance of a proposition here, and then I will do some research and add justifications to it to, you know, prove or disprove its, you know, truth. Yeah.
Rebutter did something very similar. You might look at it. I think I also cited it in my paper, by the way.
Yeah,
I
Rebutter was something I
added the
wasn't
link.
aware of.
Okay.
I loved Rebutter. I just wish it had been a little bit more fine grained, right? Like I think the just
Exactly.
putting one URL against another URL is not helpful enough to most people. They don't want to.
Exactly.
You need to give them more context. And most
So
users,
it has annotation technology, but not the building block, the atomic building blocks, what to talk about, right?
right. Yeah. There's something else I was just gonna say.
Yeah, you were going over your the features you envisioned. So you had your appearances now. So it seems like this is similar, or
this is very similar as far as like there's a run of text, and this could be on site, where someone's doing what I was calling a summary based justification, and then that person is sort of the primary owner of the with the visual the visual appearances, like the things that show up when you just look at it, or it could be off-site, just any third-party website, and then all users are sort of at the same level of like, hey, okay, we're underlining this text, we're saying that it should be paraphrased in this way, or we're quoting it over here for this justification. But yeah, this is like that, very much that same idea. So this one, yeah, if the user had the browser plugin installed, they might see this, and they wouldn't see or they might see all of the user activity, or the user activity filtered for that. Well, I shouldn't say filtered, but sorted by relevance given their own preferences, that sort of thing. Yeah, there was one thing I was just going to say. It's gonna come to me later. I'll ping you, Stephen, or I'll mention it in the chat. But there's like some other. Anyway, shouldn't have stayed up so late. Yeah. So we're at 9:07. I don't know how do you usually deal with time? I think I'm fine now. My work day technically is starting, but I mentioned this to you, Stephen. This is kind of
we do
a
go over time
vacation week.
sometimes, but I need to get back to work at some point. Maybe some concluding remarks could be that you can summarize to us what you hope to get out of attending these meetings or working together, or like what's your main reason for reaching out, and what do you hope to work on?
Yeah, so I mean, at this point, I'm so new to CDL, and each one of you, I can't say for certain, what I would want, but that the possibilities are, one, CDL is creating this unified platform that does enough of what I want to do that I would rather, contribute to that, because I'd rather see this move forward as opposed to being like, my project on the side that moves forward at the pace I can contribute to it. It's still a little unclear to me if CDL is going to be a unified tool or if it's going to be a federation of tools. So it's a federation of tools. I want to either have my tool supported by it, like, hey, we've agreed on a argument interchange format, and here's what I need for mine, and here's what you guys are asking for yours. So let's make sure the database that we're working from handles this. Or maybe Stephen, right now it looks like Socrates is like very much kind of like on a similar goal. So I think you and I think we definitely want to chat further about like, okay, what iron out the more fine points of like what we're expecting the tools, because Socrates is so much like how'd you I could see that even in a federated case, you and I would find some way of working together perhaps. So I don't know, but yeah, those are my. I like this tool. I really want to use it, but I'm only one person, and so I'm really excited to find people who also feel the same sort of urge that yes, this is something that the world needs. We should be working on it. Let's find a way to implement it. That's what I'm here for.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't think there's even quite an agreement on that. Are we a federation or are we working on one tool? What I'm hoping, my personal goal, is that we can work together on a kind of reference library that we can use in our respective tools, so that there's a lot of underlying logic that we can share. But that's my objective. Tim is trying to make a centralized repository for all claims. That's his goal. A lot of us are federation, but referring to that centralized thing. So it depends. And I don't think this is something we absolutely need to resolve, but being able to say these are, being part of the federation means being able to handle these use cases. And that means here's a data format that can resolve those use cases. For me, that's a key goal we're trying to reach together.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like, because I've been tossing things over in my head, but seeing you all toss them over in your heads and make other ideas, like, oh, don't forget that it needs to handle this. That's incredibly helpful to me to have that sort of back and forth.
Yeah, but
Carl.
it's helpful and frustrating for all of us. Let's be very honest here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that some of the things we're focusing on now is trying to find a minimal subset that of be it a data format or be it a shared library or be it just a minimal subset of what we can agree on. And that's why we even every now and then have to go back to basics like we did yesterday, like what is a claim? Because a claim is a highly overloaded term, it can be many things. Does it include context? Doesn't it include context? Is somebody claiming it? Is it free of context? Like you attach to each claim the user that created it, etc. There's like endless discussions about this. So yeah, you can definitely join those. My personal goal is at a very minimum to have a shared data format, because that would imply that we share concepts. It would imply that we agree on, for example, what a standalone claim is, whether or not we want to represent it in your system. That would be a great starting point, regardless of whether it's federated or just runs in a desktop in an isolated app or in a web app. That shouldn't really matter. But yeah.
That reminded me, Stephen, when you mentioned the standalone claim, is what I was thinking is, I love how Socrates is combining the negation with the I think the normal form is maybe what you call it, but the non-negated form. I would like to go. I think there's more to that situation. I think that I think there's equivalent propositions. So things that, even though they're not textually identical, like all or most users agree that they're semantically equivalent.
Yes.
And then there's of course the anti-equivalent, which is what you've captured with the not. It's like, yes, this apostrophe NT like didn't that changes this particular proposition to mean the logical opposite. But then there's other things too. There's alternatives, which I was thinking just as a way to describe things that some users think is a preferred proposition. Like, yes, you're looking at this proposition, but this proposition is kind of a red herring because maybe it lacks context to make it a useful thing to debate, or maybe like what you really want to be looking at is this this proposition over here, which is a better formulated.
That's the third option that you talked about. Like for me, I call it the "it depends" option. Like when you say, well, I don't agree or disagree with this because it depends on some external. But yeah, a lot of these discussions, and Mike and Twan can also go at great length about equivalence classes and stuff like that from a mathematical perspective. This is the type of stuff we talk about. A lot of the stuff you summarized, we've spent hours on. So I think you'll feel right at home. Unfortunately, that does mean, because we talk about these things so much, that there is very little agreement in terms of basic atomic units we want to share at this point. But that's something we all hope to achieve. That is the goal.
Yeah, and I thought it might be good to just kind of bring up kind of a point of order, or efficiency in meetings, is that since we've now, I think everyone except for Carl, we've been working together for over a year on this. There's a lot of built up words and communication. And so Carl, when you're coming in, it may be very confusing. And there's a balance between asking questions, and then what we might want to do is, that's an in-depth topic, and one of us would volunteer to have a separate meeting with you to go into detail on the history on that, since we don't have a great document. But we've had some situations where we have someone come in for a period of time, and then we lose like 4 or 5 meetings, because every time we talk about something, there's a history. There's a history there. So I don't want to discourage participation, but well,
on our side, we need to spend more time writing more. This is the stuff we agree on. This is the stuff we don't agree on. The big problem is we're still haggling terms, and that makes writing difficult.
I thought about maybe we should, after the end of each meeting, we should discuss what to put in a tweet and send out a tweet after every meeting.
Yeah, we have started trying to make to have a little 5-minute short version at the end of each meeting.
I'd love to revive the glossary. Honestly, I don't know why that the whole. I mean, a glossary solves most of these problems. If you share the same language, then it's easier to communicate what language means to others, to new and to new people that join.
Sorry.
I agree with that, Stephen. I don't think, yeah, I think even if the tweet is, we updated the glossary, here's the new,
Yeah,
our new
exactly.
definition, right? So people can also look at history, but yeah, I mean, so I don't remember the link to that, if we have it on a Google Doc or something, but
Wasn't it
maybe if you
Trello?
post that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not updated, so it's out of date right now.
Yeah, we could just start a new one.
If people are behind that, for me, it's an essential part of software engineering, actually. So I adopt domain-driven design, and the whole point there is that you understand the domain, you agree on the terminology you use in the domain before you even can try to implement it. Otherwise, it's an ambiguous term. You're talking about different things, and it doesn't make things easier.
Yeah. I think
So,
why it failed last time is because we tried to define everything, and everybody wanted to bring in their ideas how to construct their system.
Because
And I think we
concepts
should
rely on other concepts.
Yeah, we should do it a bit more lazily. Like when someone wants to introduce a term, we discuss it and then we enter it together into the system, like the standalone claim.
Yeah, so maybe we could start that off in next meeting. So also, Carl, if you're reading through the white paper, that was mostly Tim, even though I was in CDL from the beginning, he wrote it. I did a little edits, and that is probably about 2 years old. So keep that in mind.
Okay.
And you may even decide it may not. I think it's good to get a feeling for where Tim and I were at, because I disagree with several things there, but it's a good framing point, because it is kind of what drove us together, but a lot of it is outdated.
Yeah. Now, one thing I'm thinking as I'm hearing you all talking is that each meeting could have sort of some summary notes at the top of this was the sort of the high level takeaways from the conversation. And then if we wanted to, we could have a table underneath. I have a comparison table in my document that I shared in chat. This was Howju based, but what I'm thinking of is a sort of a similar format where each row would be each participant or each tool's representative, and then there's two columns after that name. The first column is basically the things that they sort of like agreed on, like the things that are like, oh, these are the things that yes, like work for this tool. And then the second column are the places where there's differing opinions or impedance mismatch, like something that doesn't work for this use case about the current topic. And I kind of separated that third column into like pros, as in like these are things that this tool has kind of, it's good that this tool has an impedance mismatch, and then the cons were kind of like it's bad that this tool has an impedance mismatch. Like the tool doesn't have a good way of accounting for this, even though it's and it's not accounted for. I don't know if that makes sense, that idea, but just basically some sort of basic takeaway of the meeting. I don't know if that's too much overhead. Sometimes chatting is just easier, but if we're looking at a way of capturing.
I think some overhead is needed in these meetings because we need more output. I think that's something we agree on, especially indeed if we extract interested people like you to get up to speed. We need some, so maybe it's good overhead.
Okay.
But
I mean, I might,
except that it typically isn't that tool focused. It's usually more abstraction focused, or like, yeah, you'll notice that topics devolve quickly because of a lack of a shared terminology, in my opinion.
yeah, so
It
just
makes
having
perfect sense to
philosophy.
me that happens. Even in my own head, I feel there's all kinds of thoughts moving around, and so I'm imagining different people with different backgrounds and also different goals with their tools. I can just imagine. Yeah, it makes sense. For me personally, I'm gonna look at least some of the most recent videos, and then any of the ones you all point me to. I would be interested in starting trying this. Is tomorrow the next meeting? I don't have a schedule
Friday.
memorized
Friday.
yet.
Yeah, I can invite you to the Google Calendar if you like.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Somehow I got an iCal, so I think I might already have it in my calendar. But yeah, please invite me to the Google Calendar.
Yeah,
I'm happy to take a stab at the.
Can you send me your email address in Slack then, please?
Yeah.
Or here in the chat, as you like.
I just put it in the Hangouts chat. Anyone wants to email me? Just first and last name.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, awesome getting to know you. Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, my pleasure. This is a lot of fun. It's been. I was super excited to see Socrates and also CDL, that there's people working kind of on this area, because I just I had this burning feeling that this was something worth doing, and I was surprised that I didn't find others, and now that I know that I just didn't know about them for a couple of years, it's heartening.
Yeah, be sure to check the chat. Most of the other links of everyone in this group I posted there, if you didn't write them down already.
I think I've entered them. Yeah.
Okay,
I'll,
good.
I'll export the chat and post it in the Hangouts channel.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard
Okay.
to find people to talk about this stuff. So yeah, I'm happy you found a way here.
Mhm.
See you next time.
Awesome.
Okay. See you
Bye,
next
everybody.
time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Take care.